roughly 5 to 10 minute speech detailing the big ideas in your thesis, at which point we'll have roughly about 40 minutes or so of panel discussion here between myself, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Lerner, and Mr. Vaughn here, at which point we'll turn it over to the audience, and you guys will have roughly 10 minutes or so to be able to ask Ms. Bannock questions about something that is incomprehensible. So good luck, have fun. And we like to save the last couple of minutes or the last couple of questions for our family, so please feel free to jump in there at the end, okay? Other than that, the only bits of housekeeping that we have to do is if you have a cellular device with you, please make sure that you turn it onto airplane mode or turn it off. It doesn't matter to me which one it is, but it should be one of the two. Please try your best to refrain from leaving the room, just so that way we don't have any interruptions, okay? I think I've said everything that I need to say. So then, Ms. Bannock, take it away.
Hey, welcome. Thank you all for coming and for your support. Before I begin, I would like to say a quick thank you to Mr. Hoffman for the amount of effort he put into helping me with my thesis. Not only as my thesis advisor, but particularly as my precept leader. He would literally stay after our precept for an hour each time, talking with us about our books, continuing to seminar, as well as just offering general life advice, so thank you. How many of you can think of something that is impossible? Not improbable, not unlikely, impossible. I can think of hundreds of examples. For one, let's take all the grass in the world suddenly turning neon pink. I can't think of a way for that to occur. Nothing else changing, the grass simply starting to grow pink. What do we do if something impossible like that does occur? What if the impossible thing is bigger than the plants changing colors, such as freedom of choice? How do we react? What can we do? Questions like these were haunting me while I read about one particular topic, absurdity. There are certain things that are completely out of the realm of human reason, things that there is no possible way within this finite world for them to occur. Impossibilities are a part of the finite world. I wanted to delve deeper into this idea and explore precisely what that means and the choices it leaves me with. So I chose to examine absurdity. I used Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, which is an exploration of faith, particularly the example of Abraham and Isaac. He explains how God's task for Abraham was absurd. It was impossible, a paradox, that God's promises to Abraham could not occur if he killed Isaac, and then examined Abraham's faith using that base layer of absurdity. I used Leo Tolstoy's Walk in the Light and 23 Tales, which is a collection of short stories about Christian anarchy, in which the eponymous is about a man, Julius, who struggles with whether or not to join the Christian communes, eventually deciding to join near the end of his life. Julius contrasts well with Rousseau, the main character of Camus' The Stranger. These two men both have to face absurdity, and deal with it in two separate ways. As a companion to The Stranger, I use Sartre's An Explication of The Stranger, which explores the main theme of The Stranger, absurdism, and compares Camus' take on absurdism with Kierkegaard's. I started out first with the task of setting up clear boundaries on what absurdity itself is. The absurd must be impossible. It cannot be improbable, unexpected, unforeseen, or any such adjectives. It must simply be impossible. Not only that, but it must also, paradoxically, occur. It can't be justified, which I define as an explanation which helps humans understand that impossible things occur, except that it can be justified in one way. Through the infinite. Basically, God, a deity, some kind of higher power being that operates outside of the finite, which is the human world. From these requirements for absurdity, I then moved into exploring specific topics, namely free choice. Throughout our lives, hundreds of experiences force us in different directions. Our choices are influenced by our past. It is impossible that we should be able to choose because our decision-making is simply based on the previous information that we receive. And the characters seem to exemplify this at first, particularly in the example of one of Tolstoy's short stories, where a group of people sit around and realize that not one person at that table is happy. They are all in agreement. They need to leave their current lives behind and go join the Christian communes. But the circumstances of their lives pull them in different directions, and so they allow themselves to go with the current. Their perception of the world that was driven into them by the circumstances of their life resulted in them not doing what they were well aware was the more beneficial choice. But Rousseau demonstrates that, impossibly, there is free choice. clear that Meursault is aware of the impossibility of free choice through an examination of his internal dialogue. But near the end of the book, he demonstrates free choice to us. He decides to open himself up to the indifference of the world. Meursault chose it, which is demonstrated by his use of an active verb there, as opposed to him saying that he was opened. He chose to stray from where his circumstances led him. Julius does something similar, originally coming to the same conclusions as the previous group of people who had let the world influence astray them from what they knew to be best. From there, these two men have yet another choice. Julius, upon arriving to the commune, is faced with yet more absurdity. Julius takes the route of justification through the infinite. He is faced with choices and decides that his choice has meaning, and to choose the path that honors God. However, Meursault chooses a different route. Meursault considers that he is going to die at the end of his life, and as he doesn't believe in any form of afterlife or higher power, his actions are meaningless. What does it matter whether he behaves in accordance with the morals of the world, when he is going to die, and existence for him will end regardless of the choices that he makes? But Meursault finds peace and happiness within this, and ends his life content with his actions. Based on these two characters and their reactions when faced with the absurd, I came to the conclusion that there were two options that humans have when faced with the absurd. They can choose to justify absurdity through religion, a god, some form of a higher power, and an afterlife. This is typically the easier option, as people tend to prefer being able to reason, speaking from my own experience. However, people can also choose to accept the meaninglessness of their life and their actions, and find peace, comfort, even happiness in that, as Meursault did. There are people who have never reasoned through absurdity, and thus have not had any reason to make this choice, and continue operating in blissful ignorance. But once you understand absurdity, this choice is thrust upon you. I want to implore you to spend time reflecting upon which of these options you choose. Consider this carefully, as it will impact your outlook on life forever. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the lovely speech, Ms. Bannock. I think I would like to start out with Meursault. You explained that he views his life and his actions in his life as meaningless, but he chooses to keep living anyway. And I'm wondering why he makes that choice.
Yeah, so it seems almost like he innately wants to live, because I talked about that a little bit in my essay, because it seems like that would lead him to be suicidal, but he isn't. Let's see. Yeah, he wants to live, and he like genuinely wants to live. I think he just enjoys the experience. Sartre talks about this a little bit too. Experiencing life or the experience, it doesn't matter what choices you make, because no matter what, you're going to get an experience, even if that experience is your death. And so I think that Meursault kind of follows along that. He's like, I want to have more experiences, but if the experience I have is my death, that's fine. He, at the end of the book, his only desire is to have a crowd of jeering fans so that he dies less alone.
Yeah, what a strange thing to say, right? What a strange thing to wish for. Are all experiences, for an absurd man like Meursault, are all experiences qualitatively equal?
I think so. I think that they might have a experience that they prefer to have. So like, you could be the kind of person who prefers to have an experience where you are moral. Meursault was not that kind of person. So it's just, I think, a matter of personal preference, not like based on any like set rules. It's just what experiences you want to have.
You talk about Meursault. Is this the case for Julius as well?
No, not in the same way, because Julius chooses the other option. He chooses to justify through God. And because he chooses to justify through God, he has a set group of rules that he wants to follow through. So for him, his experiences have to align with those rules.
I see. And part of these rules, or part of the tasks that he is set before him, is the work of God, right? As he's told at the commune. I want to double check. The work of God is infinite.
Yes.
How does Julius find meaning in that?
Yeah. So that was one of my favorite parts actually, because I really enjoyed that part of it. Let's see. Yeah, he says God's work, like himself, is infinite. God's work is you. Come to him and be not a laborer, but a son, and you will become a partner of the infinite God and of his world. And that comforted Julius, because it's a matter of he, throughout his life, had been like trying to set things down. He needed to achieve this happiness by this age. He had to stay with his son. He had to do this and this and this. But now he knows he can never complete God's work. But also, by even trying to complete God's work, he is in his own sense completing God's work, and that's absurdity. But he's, again, justifying it through God.
I feel like we're talking a lot.
I can jump in if you want.
Only if you want to.
Oh, I mean, have to.
It's meeting us anyway, so.
Hang on, in the front. I guess I'll bring it back more to broad picture. What do we mean that freedom of choice is something impossible or something absurd? How is that so?
Yeah. So, I mean, it occurs.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I came to the conclusion that it was impossible is because you are a product of the life you have lived. Basically, when you were born, you had a set of parents. Those parents helped institute what kind of child you were, like their rules, their forms. And every single decision that you make based on information that you already have. And that information that you already have is information you gained from the past and what has influenced you. So it seems like no matter what, you're on a set path, because whatever decision you make is based on all the previous information that you have. And so, therefore, it seems like it should be impossible. I can't think of a way for that to not happen, because no matter what you choose, you're choosing it based off the past. But somehow, it has to be possible because we see the characters doing that.
So, freedom of choice then is something which we believe to be informed by prior experience, and that is that idea then within the realm of the possible. Is it the impossible then that we make a choice contrary to past experience, or sometimes out of line with that?
Yeah, that's where the impossibility happens. But my whole thing is impossible things do occur, and that's what absurdity is. Like if you look at Abraham's example of absurdity, which is like the main one I base this off of. God had promised Abraham that Isaac would bear many sons, and then he told him to kill Isaac, and it was impossible that he could do both things. But Abraham had to there was no way, so Abraham had to accept that this was impossible, still follow through with it, and then it turned out being possible. And that's, still not possible because if he had gone through with what God had said.
Gotcha.
But it's a matter of he justified it through, it's God.
So more reliant upon the infinite reason versus
Yeah.
like finite reason in terms of. Okay, all right. One more curious, Mr. Bond, did you want to ask more about impossibilities?
More about choice. Does a choice have to be free of limitations or influence in order to be a choice?
No, I don't think so. I think the problem is no matter, the idea is that even if you have let's say you have 40 options, but no matter what, you're going to choose the one because of everything that has been in your past. You're basing it off the knowledge you have, so then you're going to choose the one.
Yeah, so is free choice an example of the absurd, or is it just a poor terminology? Like, choice isn't free.
So that's why I was saying, when I was talking about this with my mother, she brought up the idea of two twins who were raised in the exact same environment and household, and they grow up with different personalities. Even if the same events happen to them, people can handle trauma in different ways, things like that. So somehow it's occurring, but so it must be to some degree free, even if there are still limitations. You still have a choice versus it seems logically that there should be no choice, you're just going to be choosing based on your past.
So is free choice an absurdity, or is choice an absurdity?
I guess choice in particular is an absurdity. The freedom to choose is what I was kind of going to, trying to explain with freedom choice. Freedom to choose.
Where do we find meaning in life then, if our choices are not choices?
Rousseau didn't.
Okay, all right.
He did or he didn't?
He did not.
He did not find purpose.
That was the whole thing, is your choices are, he believed life was meaningless. The other option is that, and I talked about this in an essay I wrote for HL a while ago too, of the gods, because life is immortal, their actions don't matter to them, because there is no punishment. If they want to act immorally and they believe they can get away with it, then they will. But Julius he found meaning in life through like the divinity side of it. Rousseau just made the choice not to find meaning in life. He found peace and happiness, but he didn't find meaning. So it seems like those are separate things.
Yeah, one of the curious things that Rousseau, I want to come back. I know that we have questions about the punishment. But I want to stick with Rousseau for just a second. You say on page 4, where you're quoting Camus, page 14, sorry, not page 4. As soon as he opens himself up to the gentle indifference of the world, right? The world doesn't care about you. As soon as he did this, you say, he, quote, began finding it so much like myself, so like a brother, really. I felt that I had been happy, and that I was happy again. How is Rousseau similar to the meaningless absurdity of the world? What does he mean that it's like a brother to him?
I think it's again like he thinks that his actions in life are meaningless because he's gonna die, and so he won't have like any effect on the world very much. He's getting killed right now. Additionally, when he's dead, I think that in his mind, to some degree, the world just like stops. When the world stops existing for him, then it doesn't matter anymore. And so, in that way, he's like the meaninglessness of the world, because he is meaningless to himself.
How does one find peace and meaninglessness?
That is a great question. I don't know. I'm personally on the other path, because I like logic. And so he seems to just, it almost like give up is the best way to describe it. Like, he quits caring in a sense. It's on the last page of this book is where he talks about that. And he says, like, what did other people's death or mother's love matter to me? What did his God or the lives people choose or the fate they think they elect matter to me when we're all elected by the same fate? Me and billions of privileged people like him who also call themselves my brother. So he's given up on like human relationships. He doesn't care. And he also says, I have lived my life one way and I could just as well have lived it another. It seems like I don't quite know how exactly to go about achieving it, because it seems like he's in that state at the start of the book. Like, he shows no emotion at his mother's death. His mother, who he referred to with a term similar in French to mommy. Like, he doesn't care what life throws at him because he's gonna die, so it's all gonna end anyways. So I think it's a matter of just like, accepting you're gonna die, what does it matter? And he found comfort in that. He was like, well, I don't have to try, almost, is a good way to describe it. He found that comforting.
You compare this idea in your essay to Kierkegaard's idea of infinite resignation.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help at all with how do we find peace, or how do we find happiness and meaninglessness?
Only if I understood what Kierkegaard meant by it.
Well, maybe Miss Madden could help us with that.
So, infinite resignation is kind of the idea of just accepting something's absurd, accepting that it's impossible. And so, Rousseau also accepts that it's impossible that he's going to not die. He has to die. There's no way for him to escape that. So he resigns himself to that, and I believe that that is basically the idea of infinite resignation, is resigning to yourself to something that is impossible.
Why would I? It's just a problem of understanding. Why would I resign myself to anything that I found meaningless? Like, it seems like the things that we attach ourselves to and dedicate ourselves to have some sort of meaningfulness to us.
I'm a little bit confused, but I guess, can you rephrase that? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't think the question is dissimilar from what Mr. Hoffman asked at the very beginning. I don't understand why, and I haven't read the story, unfortunately. I don't, is it Merceau?
Merceau.
I don't understand why Merceau, from what I read about him in your essay, what's driving him to continue living. Like I think you answered he has an innate desire to live, but what made that innate? Like, why is it there?
I suppose I don't exactly know. I believe that the one thing he does find meaning in is having experience. Having
Okay.
an experience. He doesn't care what the experience is. He finds his actions meaningless, not the experience meaningless. They're separate things. Like, it doesn't matter if he's shooting someone or giving someone flowers. They're both experiences, but he doesn't find meaning in his actions. He doesn't care whether he doesn't find meaning in giving someone flowers any more so than he does shooting someone.
Does he find innate meaningfulness in experience in and of itself?
I think that, yes. I think that's almost separate from the other things, because the absurd things that he has to resign himself to are choice and death. And experience, you have an experience before you die. It could be a very, very, very short experience, but inevitably you are going to have an experience. And so I think that that's the one thing, is that he just cares to experience, and he does find meaning in that, but the meaninglessness comes from what experience? Most people tend to care about their actions. He doesn't.
I have a couple of questions about those final experiences. The very last experience you mentioned is looking forward to the group of spectators, but they're not just any group of spectators, they hate his guts. Why does he care that this group of spectators would hate his guts as he dies?
So yeah, I'm going to look at that quote again, because it's been a little while since I've read this book. So he's happy. It says, finding it so much like myself, so much like a brother really, I felt I had been happy and that I was happy again. For everything to be consummated, for me to feel less alone, I had only to wish that there be a large crowd of spectators on the day of my execution, and that they greet me with cries of hate. And again, I think that adds to the experience. Like, it's another thing he gets to experience beyond just getting his head cut off.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's that
So,
again.
Excitement of a new experience.
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit before that, he has another experience that stands out. There's that priest that comes to visit him.
Mm-hmm.
And this priest sort of goes a little bit at him here and again, here and again. Eventually this guy blows up.
Mhm.
Like, he gets mad. Like, not even when he shot the other man was he this mad.
Yeah.
Why is he this mad at this man?
Because he looks down on people who don't. He looks down on people who make the other choice.
Merceau or?
Merceau.
Okay.
You're talking about Merceau's blowing up?
Right.
or the
Why
priest?
was Merceau blowing up?
Yeah, I think he doesn't. He basically looks down on people who do have meaning. Like throughout this book, he has kind of a superiority complex. I don't think there's a single character in this book that I didn't see him view as less than him. So I think that to some degree he took offense to someone trying to be like, my way is better than you, because of that superiority complex that he has.
Wait, the guy who thinks his way is better than everyone else gets upset because someone thinks their way is better than his?
Yes.
So this finally gets him. Cool. Why is it then that he feels threatened by this?
I think again that he doesn't want to even have the possibility of having to accept that a different way is even valid in any form. And so that's again the superiority complex of like, no, your way can't be upset, and I feel attacked because you're not listening to me. And so it triggered almost like a fight or flight response in him.
Almost almost sort of like an existential crisis. If I lose this battle, then maybe my life really is more meaningless than I thought it was.
More meaningful.
More meaningful. So on the flip side then, why is the priest, why is he so insistent? Because they butt heads and go at it for a few rounds there.
He doesn't understand how someone can live a meaningless life. And I, to some degree, understand where the priest is coming from of, if you are the kind of person who likes to logically set things out, when someone just throws away all logic, and it's just like, well, life is meaningless, that's what it is. You're like, no, that you can't do that. And I think that's where the priest's frustration was coming from.
Okay.
You give us this third, not the third alternative. Let's not talk about that. But you give us this other option, right? That some people just live in this sort of blissful ignorance, right? Would that be better? Instead of being Julius or instead of being Rousseau, would it be better just? I don't know what the absurd is. I'm not going to think about it. It's incomprehensible. It's too troubling.
Yeah. So I believe that Augustine, and I don't remember where the quote is, but Augustine talked about that. And he said, no, it is better to think on it. But I think it's a matter of if you believe that you should pursue all knowledge. Miss Woolley's essay was a lot about that. But the idea of it's really dependent on if you believe that all knowledge is worthwhile, then yes, you should come to this point. And personally, I think that all knowledge is you should pursue knowledge. Even if it's bad knowledge, it's a matter of making a choice to use it well. And so in that case, yes, it is better to acknowledge what absurdity is, because then you can make the choice. If you don't ever make the choice, you don't ever truly know yourself.
Yeah, and so we're back to choice. What is the part of ourselves that is making the choice? If we don't, you see what I'm saying? What's going on there?
Making the choice of
like
between the two?
Yeah, like Meursault saying, "Oh yes, and I opened myself up to the indifference of the universe." Right? What part of him was making that choice, or Julius choosing to go to the Christian commune? Yeah.
Well, again, it's not a physical body part. I don't have quite the word for it because I didn't really explore this topic specifically. I kind of just took it as you, so like your innate humanness, like the internal dialogue and the circumstances around you that make you you. So I guess like a soul would be the best way to describe it.
Is this active like all the time? Or are we? I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Yeah, is this active all the time, or at only certain moments?
Like our soul?
Yes.
Yeah,
Those
I think
things.
it's active all the time.
Okay.
Like you can't be you without having this part of your soul. So like I guess someone in a coma or something like that, that's when it's not active. But just generally as a human being, your you-ness is still around you all the time.
You guys, are you okay to go to punishment and reward, or?
That's,
Yeah.
I want to, not quite from that angle. Why would if death is it, right? Why would the lack of an afterlife make life itself meaningless?
Yeah, so I talked about this a lot, not in this thesis, but in my essay about the Aeneid. And basically, and I talked to Mr. Hoffman about this and briefly in here, but if you never are going to see the consequences of your actions, in fact, I guess in a sense, if you don't believe in an afterlife or whatever, there's no way to prove the world goes on after you die. So, for all you know, like Descartes, this could all be in your mind. But it's a matter of like, well, everything's gonna go away anyways, so I might as well just make the choice I want to make right now. And even if you're worried about future consequences while you're alive, it's once I die, everything goes away anyways, so I can do whatever while I'm here.
Why would my non-existence nullify any of the good things that I did when I was alive?
I don't believe they do, but I think if it's not nullifies it, it's you're not going to be affected by it. And human beings tend to do things for their own benefit. That benefit can be helping someone else, and like the knowledge that you helped someone else. But for people like Merceau, that benefit was like, hey, this is the thing I want to do right now, so I'm just going to do it. I guess the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, well, again, I haven't read the story, but it doesn't take much convincing that Merceau's life was meaningless. But even if he's right, and death is it, I don't know why, and I'm trying to think of a different word than nullify. Why would that
Void.
which is nullified.
Sorry.
Why would that void or nullify, like, I've already said it, the good things that I've done. You know, so when you commit an act of charity or love for someone who's in need, there's meaningfulness in that act.
Mm-hmm.
That meaningfulness goes away if there's nothing after death. Is that what?
To you it does. Not to that person, to you. And so I guess it's like, you can if that's something that you want to do and you want to give that meaningfulness to other people, then that's the choice that you'll make. That's the experience you want to have.
Yeah, but it makes all those acts of charity and all those acts of goodness seem like they're a means to something else. And I'm wondering why someone like Aristotle's not right, where virtue is done for virtue's sake, not for what you get out of it or what you get from it.
So my basis for that is basically every single human action is made by weighing costs and benefits. The economic principle of like cost versus benefit. And so even if that benefit is for someone else, it's still something you want to do. You never make a choice that you don't want to make. If that, like, even if it's something you don't want to do, you still want to make that choice because you think the net positive is going to end up as a net positive, basically.
What net positive is there for the soldier who throws himself on a grenade to save the rest of his soldiers?
A few options. Number one, the possibility of living with guilt the rest of his life. Additionally, he genuinely wants to help other people, and so he gets the knowledge that he's helping other people as he dies.
For a split second, yeah.
Yeah, so even if he believes that that benefit is worthwhile to him.
The benefit's over.
Yeah, but it was important enough of a benefit to him in that moment that he was willing to throw away other possible benefits. It's like a higher net positive than other options.
And what is the benefit that's higher in net positive than his own life in that moment when he or she, is choosing to throw themselves on the grenade?
I've never been in that situation, so I don't
Neither
know.
have I. I know it only from movies.
I guess they want that, something about that to them, that experience is important to them. Not enough so that they'd obviously go out and seek it, but that making that choice to help someone else is the net positive that they want to get.
We help others for the experience of helping and not for the sake of helping others.
They're kind of like integrated almost. Basically, the experience of helping others is helping others. You wouldn't help others if you didn't think you were doing the right thing.
Okay.
So you have that knowledge of you think it is the right thing to do. So that's the positive you get from that. You believe that negatives are subjective to the individual person.
I don't quite understand that, but we can move on if you want.
I would just wanted to go the other directions. We've been talking about a finite end to life. What if we're looking at infinity, right? What if
Yeah.
our work is like Julia's,
Yeah.
and there's no end? And how you see what I'm saying?
Like, what do you do if there's never-ending work?
Yeah. If the task at hand is infinite and there is no end to it, then your work isn't actually contributing to it, right? It doesn't seem like you're getting any closer to the end because it is infinite. Can we find meaning in that? If we can, how?
I mean, Julius did, and the infinite thing is absurd, and that's basically, I took it as, like, infinite work of God. There is no way for you to ever complete all the tasks God has for you, or could give you. But by putting in any effort, you are also simultaneously completing the tasks God has given you. That's like the justification side of it, and that's where he found meaning, was in justifying it through, well, I am doing God's work because I am putting in effort.
Is God identical to the absurd, or are those two concepts the same thing?
I think absurd is something that comes from God. I think God can himself be absurd, but he is not absurdity itself.
Okay. He has power over it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering is it okay if we play with this for a little while? Wait, how far does that power extend? Like, can God make square circles and triangular rectangles, parallel lines touch, like these sorts of things? Like,
Yeah, that's the whole idea of omnipotence. Is that he has complete control even over things that are impossible.
Okay. I'm wondering what happens, so geometry is fun, but I'm wondering what happens when we come back to what it is, it's kind of fun to think about, I don't know what to tell you. I'm wondering what happens when we come back to Abraham and Isaac. Does God have power, does he have the power to turn goodness into evil?
Yes.
And vice versa?
Yes.
All right,
Omnipotent
okay.
is like a big basis of like my whole justifying through the infinite is assuming the infinite is omnipotent, so full control over everything, even impossible things, even good and evil.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't want to distract anyone.
In the moment that Abraham is getting ready with the knife, right? Isaac's sitting here. He's like ready to go. He's like stepped above the universal. He's a singular individual. All that. Okay. How does he know that he is?
How does Abraham know that he is?
Kierkegaard's another question. That would be very interesting. But how does Abraham in the moment, right?
That's one of the things Kierkegaard touches on, is you can't think about it.
Nice. Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it doesn't make sense, and so therefore don't think about it. Like, he literally says Abraham cannot think about this, because in doing so he would acknowledge that this is absurd and it must be a test from God, and then he's automatically failed. So he doesn't technically know he is. He just is acting upon the faith there.
Is Mirceau doing something similar when he shoots the Arabian Man?
I think so. I don't.
No, I'm really interested to hear this.
Or at least he's just not thinking in the same way that Abraham wasn't thinking. I don't know that he has actually managed to do it, but he's just acting upon, this is what I need to do right now, in the same way that Abraham did.
How do you trust or follow a God or a goodness that vacillates like that? Like, how do I proceed in life loving my enemy if I know that one day that command is going to be reversed and I'm going to be told to stab my enemy in the face? And then the next day he'll go back and love your enemy again because I've changed my mind.
I'm not completely sure on that. Fear and Trembling was a very hard book for me to read. Those seminars were frustrating, as I'm sure those two can attest. And I guess that's the whole faith thing, is you have to accept that universal what is considered ethical on these bounds, you still have to accept that if God is telling you to do that, then by doing so, you are stepping out as the single individual above the universal.
What pulls Julius in that direction? What helps him crest the hill saying, okay, I'm all in, let's do it?
He sits down and thinks over his life, which is a big one. After his son celebrates that he's dead, or thinks he's dead, his son goes and celebrates.
Sorry, I haven't read the story. So Julius seems like he's a father. He's an old enough gentleman, 40s, 50s, 70s, 80s.
At this point, I think he's 70s, around.
It's like AARP. He's ready.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay,
Yeah.
he's having to think about his life.
Yeah, when he gets to the commune, he goes, I'm too old to work. And they're like, well, just do what you can.
Okay.
And that's the sort of thing that we talked about previously.
And so this thing that he's doing that he can is simply think about his life and go over it. Is he evaluating the meaning of his life, or what other happiness he can derive from it?
I think he's doing the same thing that the people sat around the table did. And it's am I living my life the way I want to be living it?
What do the other people decide about their own lives and how they want to live it?
The exact same thing as Julius does, but then they talk themselves out of it, like immediately after, by going, this circumstance of my life is controlling me and I can't do it now.
This circumstance. So different circumstances sort of intervene at the last moment to convince those people, no. You want to stay over here. No. Come over here. Is there such a circumstance for Julius, or is it simply, okay, there's nothing to pull me away from this?
So he has had circumstance come again and again. One of the examples is, I believe, is it a doctor?
That's right. Yeah.
The doctor who's honest, he has gone to join the Christian communes, I think 3 times at that point.
The doctor or
Julius?
Julius. And
Okay.
every time he goes, he comes across this doctor who goes, bad idea, here's why, and talks him out of it.
Interesting.
And on this last time, the doctor does the same thing again. Julius goes, I'm done listening to you, and continues on.
Okay.
In that moment, is Julius doing a similar thing to Abraham, where he's not thinking about it anymore? He's not listening to the
Yeah.
world, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
okay, interesting.
In that sense, thinking about the world, thinking more broad again. Earlier was talked about sort of the indifference of the world. Is the indifference somewhat the same as the morals of the world, or are they separate ideas?
Separate.
Okay.
The indifference of the world is basically the world doesn't care about what you do.
Doesn't care. It's just you do as you will.
Yeah.
And that is it. What are the morals of the world?
That would be the equivalent of Kierkegaard's universal. It's considered the ethical. And that's kind of just the morals you grew up around, your society, like the world around you's morals, things that you've been taught to believe are good and bad.
So is that more societal or more like natural law? Or is it the world's morals?
It's a mixture of both. I think that societal and natural in theory should be working together. Natural is the basis in this society, like filling in the cracks. Like there is no natural law to not speed, but there is a natural, I think, law that makes the majority of humans not want to kill other humans or recklessly endanger their lives. So societal laws are the ones that seep in there, but just generally natural laws form the basis for societal laws.
Okay. And so when Julius disregards the doctor's encounter, that last encounter, it seems like he's discounting finite justice or finite logic, societal laws. Would you say that Julius is listening more to like natural law or more just simply infinite?
Infinite.
Okay.
This changes directions. So, for the one who steps over into the absurd and it is justified, why is it then a sin?
What do you mean by that?
Page 4, recording Kierkegaard, as soon as the single individual asserts himself in his singularity before the universal, that stepping over the absurd. I'm sorry, I lost my spot where I was reading. before the universal, he sins, and only by acknowledging this can be reconciled again to the universal. So I get the result, you acknowledge it as sin so that you can be reconciled with the universal. I'm curious as to why it's a sin in the first place.
So the universal is equivalent with like the ethical.
Sure.
So if you're behaving outside the ethical, sin is like the archery term for missing the mark. So you're missing the mark of the ethical is I guess the way like missing the mark. If you're aiming towards the good, by not behaving ethically, you're not going towards the good.
So Abraham is not going towards the good when he obeys God?
That's the whole thing, is that Abraham's a paradox. And so that you can't, I guess, think about it as kind of what I got from Kierkegaard is it's not supposed to make sense.
Yeah, we're gonna try it anyway. What would be Abraham's sin? Like, what would Kierkegaard say Abraham's sin was?
It would have been from killing, or even having the intent to kill his son.
Okay. So I guess in the Old Testament, sin seems to be primarily against God.
Mm-hmm.
How is that a sin against God, obeying God?
Because it's failing at the love thy neighbor part. So that's the paradox of it, is he has to break rules to follow other rules. So he is sinning, but he's still following God. So he's doing one thing against God while doing another for God.
That does seem absurd. I remember so I remember especially the retellings of Abraham and Isaac that Kierkegaard begins Fear and Trembling with, and I remember Kierkegaard dealing with the consequences of Abraham's action. That one especially where Isaac can no longer look at him the same way, because all Isaac sees is the terrifying man standing over him with a knife. So again, I get that the consequences that when Abraham goes back into a society, they might see him as a sinner or someone who has done something wrong. Do you think God sees him as a sinner?
I think that he has committed a sin. God doesn't see him as, well, okay, there is the Bible thing of everyone's considered a sinner. But disregarding that, focusing specifically on this action, I think that God has negated the sinner title because it was his command.
Okay, so his Abraham's sin then would be more against his son and his society than God? That's interesting.
I think we're about out of time. Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you, Ms. Benedict. Folks, we have about 10 minutes here. Feel free to ask some questions and take a step into the absurd. Enjoy your time there.
Ollie.
I was just wondering, is it wrong to find meaning in the finite, the possible, and just ignore, at least just not care about the impossible, or can you not do that?
Well, that's the whole, the blissful, third option of just ignoring absurdity and being like, I am not going to think about that, I am not going to acknowledge that. And I don't necessarily think so, but it's a matter of if you're the kind of person who wants to pursue knowledge and believes that you should pursue knowledge, no matter what, then you should go ahead and do that. If you don't want to pursue it, you can. I'm also trying to avoid taking a stance for any of them because I think it's a matter of personal choice. Adriana.
So let's say for a second, the Abraham and Isaac story didn't actually happen.
Okay.
I can't think of any absurd things I've seen. I can't see a reason to believe there's anything absurd that actually exists.
I mean, free choice was one of the things that I was talking about being absurd. A lot of the absurd examples are, that was the main thing that I was talking about, specifically being absurd.
But like, I don't think choice is free. I agree with you that it's defined by every single thing in our past. I don't think we choose anything. So I don't find it absurd. I think it makes sense.
See, I think that's where I disagree with you, is that based on this book, specifically, I came to the conclusion that there must be free choice based on this character.
Interesting. Okay.
And the twin example that my mother provided that I talked about earlier, like those things.
So you talked about like believing in God. So if you believe in God to like justify absurdity, is that a form of ignorance? Because you're kind of ignoring,
Ignoring what?
like you're using the example of God to justify what absurdity is, like to justify that God is the one that creates absurdity almost.
I don't think so. I think if you see impossible things and you only have one way to, there is only one way for you to like believe in them, or one way for you to explain them, and that causes you to genuinely believe in God, then I don't think that's ignorance. I think that that's just you taking information that you received and like, using it as information that you received. Akshay.
So it was Marceau, right? So if just taking one step back and applying it to anyone, if one doesn't have meaning in life, what makes him keep living it? Why does he have to suffer within that life if he doesn't have any meaning? And if he doesn't have that meaning, what makes him strive for the greater good?
He does not strive for the greater good.
What's the point of doing it? Like, what's the point of just living?
He does. He thinks experiences are cool, so he wants to get more.
Well, then if it's meaningless, then there's some meaning in experience itself, right?
Yeah, but his actions are meaningless. Experience and actions are separate things.
Right.
Brendan.
Is it a healthy mindset to think that everything you do in life is meaningless since you're gonna die anyway?
I mean, I personally don't think so, but Marceau does. So I think I personally would not recommend that path. But if it's what makes you happy, because he was happy, like he said he was genuinely happy with that mindset. So for him it was healthy. For me, it would not be healthy. So it's a matter of you and you as a person. What's that?
I had the same exact question in the middle of summer that Mr. Vaughn had about, how did you phrase it? All I remember was vacillating at the end. Like, why would you God that vacillates? And I think it's on the contrary for Abraham, because he took the previous thing that God had spoken, which is you will have like this many descendants and many stars. And when we were talking about geometry earlier, and that was consistently changed, or that was very much changing,
Yeah,
and was not
though?
consistent.
Yeah.
And so I think, like when Abraham continued to do what he did, like having that premise of, like these descendants, like I think he's whatever God said would not change. And like you earlier on, you had Julius trusting in the infinite, and so like what basis do we have to trust in God that changes?
Yeah. The thing is he looked like he was changing to humans. He wasn't actually changing. So it's a matter of trusting that he isn't changing.
Okay, so is the thing looking like it's changing, is that the absurdity rather than absurdity existing objectively, but is a matter of perspective?
Sure, that's the whole. It is possible, just humanly, from human reason, it isn't. Hence the justification through the absurd, or through the infinite. That's the word I was looking for.
So absurd doesn't exist, it only exists through our perspective?
One of Sartre's quotes talked about that. I think that it may be impossible things that exist. He says, if I were a tree among other trees, this life would have a meaning, or rather this problem would, I think this is the part that we talked about this time, that rather than this problem would have none, for I would be a part of this world. I would be this world against which I set myself with my entire mind. It is preposterous reason which sets me against all creation. I think that it's still technically impossible through human reasoning, yes, but if we don't think about it, then we don't reason through it, and then we don't realize it's impossible. It's very convoluted. It's basically, it exists, but we can only realize it exists through human reasoning. It's impossible to us, like for God, it's not impossible.
We have about 3 more minutes. Anyone in the family interested in asking some questions?
Well, she gave me this essay really late last night, and somebody that I know was gonna come, and she didn't feel good, so she wrote down 2 questions, if you don't mind, they might not exactly pair, but they're what she saw based on your essay. So she had 2. The first one is, in this day and age of rapid communication, cancel culture, and war, is the lack of free will experienced by the protagonists in the literature you cited more or less apparent now as it was to them? And would you expect the analysis undertaken by Julius and Rousseau to be different?
That was a lot of work.
Questioning after the 3rd sentence.
Yeah.
That piece of paper that you brought sent you.
They're both highlighted in yellow, both questions, so you can read both and answer briefly each. Read them both aloud if you need to.
In this day and age of rapid communication, cancel culture, and war, is the lack of free will experienced in the protagonist in the literature you cited more or less apparent now, as it was to them? And would you expect the analysis undertaken by Julius and Rousseau to be different? Why or why not? Okay, so basically, with all of our current circumstances, is the lack of free will more so now? And I think that no matter what, they're still going to have the same, they're not the same influences, but no matter what, you're going to constantly be being influenced by things. I think that maybe we get more influences from a wider variety of sources, but we're still going to be influenced by things in the same way, no matter what you're experiencing things your entire life. So I think it would be very similar, albeit different in that we have more sources coming at us now.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the next question?
Yeah, you can read it aloud and then answer it.
Can you think of an example from contemporary times that would illustrate the quandary faced by Julius and Rousseau? You can present your answer either by reference to an actual person or persons, or by way of hypothetical.
So Josiah.
Explain a little more. I mean, I think that no matter what, if you're the kind of person who sits and thinks about all of this, you're going to have to face this quandary of, what do I do? Even if it isn't with Christianity, if it's with a different religion, it's still the same idea. And so I don't have I mean Josiah, but but I think that just generally everyone in contemporary times who understands absurdity, considers this, thinks about it hard enough, reads enough philosophy, is going to have the same quandary that they did. Yeah.
So does truth get involved in absurdity? How does that impact absurdity?
I mean, absurd things are inherently true. Like, they're things that are occurring. And things that occur must be true because they are occurring. If that's what you mean.
Because something is occurring, that doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
I disagree. I think, it is true that I am holding this paper right now. It is occurring.
Okay.
So, I think that absurd things are things that must be true because they are, in that same way, things that happen.
But we don't know all truth yet, so...
No,
so
we don't know all absurdity yet either.
Well, that's true. That worked.
All right, very good. Congratulations, Mr. Allen. I do not know whose room this is, but I think it would be a courtesy to them if we packed up the chairs for them. And got everything in order.
Thank you.
I think any chairs that were taken from another room, take them back, and then just
I don't think I have.
Well, I don't know if they're not the same person.
You know, we got ours from up front. Oh,